language.
Okay. Good
And
morning.
Welcome back, folks. This is House Corrections and Institutions Committee. It's Wednesday, March 25th. We are working on our capital bill. This is section 13 of our capital bill. This pertains to Forests and Parks entering into a lease with Vermont Huts Association for them to use the structure at Little River State Park. So we have our ledge counsel here and has been working with Forests and Parks on this language. So Michael, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Good morning. This is Mike O'Grady with Legislative Counsel. As I discussed with the committee last week, these types of transfers, authority to lease or sell land by the Department of Forests and Parks must be approved by the General Assembly. Traditionally, you've done it by resolution, but you are not bound to do it by resolution. So this section would give Forests and Parks the authority to enter that long-term lease with Vermont Huts for the use of a structure at Little River State Park and the land on which the structure is located. As we discussed last week, there are conditions or criteria for that lease so that you are specific about what you're authorizing, and you're also protecting the state in any potential liability or other type of provision, like how to terminate or how to resolve conflict. So that's what this does. Page 1, line 8 and 9, it gives a term of 20 years with an option to renew for an additional 2 10-year terms at the commissioner's discretion. Line 10, it requires the lease to have a fee or fee formula for compensation of the state. Line 11 and 12, it requires conditions on the use of the structure, including the boundaries of the land and structure to be leased. Lines 13 through 16, it requires Vermont Huts to secure insurance and be subject to an indemnification clause consistent with Attachment C, the standard state provisions for contracts and grants. That provision says that if there's any liability that's brought against the state, that the contracted entity, Vermont Huts, is required to indemnify the state, pay the state for that liability. It's a pretty significant clause, but it is mandated in the standard state provisions for contracts and grants. Page 1, line 17, there needs to be provisions for termination of the lease. Lines 18 and 19, there need to be requirements for operation and maintenance of the lease structure and land, including responsibility for costs of maintenance. Line 20 is how any conflicts shall be resolved. And then page 2, lines 1 through 5, that the contract between the department and Vermont Huts is going to be executed in accordance with the standard state provisions for contracts and grants, and be required for relocation and reconstruction of the structure, the Goodell House located at Little River State Park. Now, I would have one slight edit in talking with Catherine Gessing from the agency. Page 1, line 3. I don't think you should not withstand 10 VSA section 2606. That's actually your authority to approve this lease. And I wouldn't want you to open up any interpretation that you didn't exercise that authority. So, and Catherine agrees, you don't need to not withstand 10 VSA 2606. Whereas 29 VSA 166 is BGS's authority and the governor's authority to approve, and you don't need that. So
we would take out, what you're recommending is taking out that first part, notwithstanding 10 VSA section blah blah and 29 VSA section blah
no,
blah.
I think you would take out 10 VSA section 2606 and then the word and. So it would read notwithstanding 29 VSA 166 in fiscal year 2027. And I can either redraft that or send it to John.
Send it to John. do that. So
Okay.
29 VSA, so notwithstanding, 29 VSA is BGS.
Yes,
Right. So
yes.
what are we notwithstanding within BGS?
You're notwithstanding the requirement that the Commissioner of Buildings and General Services approve this lease.
Okay. So the commissioner doesn't need to approve the lease?
No, this is Forest and Parks land. It's maintained under and authorized for conveyance under 10 VSA 2606.
Because we're entering into a lease. And normally whenever there's any state properties, state-owned land, BGS is the one that really works through that lease, negotiates the
Right,
lease.
except for Forest and Parks lands, the Agency of Natural Resources lands. The agency effectively has its own standalone authority for that, with your approval, of course.
So why, if that's the case, that Forest and Parks has that authority, why would the BGS be involved in this? Forest and Parks land.
They shouldn't be, but that's what that notwithstanding clause is there.
Just to belts and suspenders?
To be clear about, yes.
Okay. Okay. Got it. Questions on the language? James?
Not language, but the process. So this lease, after they agree to it, is gonna come back to us for approval?
No,
no.
This is effectively authorizing them to enter the
I got
lease.
you. Okay,
I was thinking your question was pertaining to the 20-year option to renew for an additional 2 10-year terms. That would not come back to us.
That would not come back to you.
There could be a potential 40-year lease.
Yes, and you have done something similar to that when you authorized the department to issue licenses for maple sugar production. And those licenses are subject to a rule, and underneath that authority, it's they can renew for 2 5-year terms without your approval. But it's the same it's just how long would you want to allow those renewal terms?
Becca, can you give me an understanding of what's the longest lease you've got going right now?
Becca, could you identify yourself for the record, please?
Certainly, Chair Emmons. For the record, my name is Rebecca Washburn. I'm the Director of Lands Administration and Recreation for the Vermont Department of Forest, Parks, and Recreation, and also the Chair of the Vermont Outdoor Recreation Economic Collaborative. And to answer your question, we have 7 ski leases. We talked about those a little bit last week when I was in providing testimony on the VT Huts proposal. In the ways that they have been amended over the years, some of them have extended for nearly 100 years. So we have very long-term leases with our ski leases, the most recent of which coming up for full-scale renewal will be Bromley in 2032. So that will be the first time we'll be considering any significant amendments to ski leases.
Great, thank you.
Questions on the language? Catherine, you worked with Michael quite a bit on Monday. Do you want to weigh in?
Thank you. My name is Catherine Guessing, and I'm General Counsel for the Agency of Natural Resources. I don't necessarily have anything to add unless you have specific questions for me. I think we're satisfied with the language. I will note that the initial 20 years is based on partly on the grant that is being provided to Vermont Huts for the relocation and renovation of the facility. And that's a 20-year grant. The investment in that facility, in that house, as a structure that can be available for lodging, for recreation, that is tied, is going to the grant contemplates that that's going to continue for at least 20 years and hopefully for longer. So that was sort of the thinking behind the initial 20 years and then an option to renew for 2 additional, terms.
So for that grant, where is it coming from, number one? And number two, is it money coming in from that grant every year for 20 years? Or is it one lump sum that is to cover 20 years? And where's the
The-
grant?
VT Huts applied for and received a congressionally directed spending grant.
Yeah. it
The
was in your-
funding was routed through Housing and Urban Development, so this is essentially a federal HUD grant, one time going to VT Huts and Trails to allow them to do a number of things, a portion of which was the renovation of the Goodell House. So this is one-time funding to support the renovation of that structure, including other activities, essentially modernizing or constructing other structures around the state.
Do you have a number in terms of how much that grant is?
I can find that. I don't have it off the top of my head.
I think we would need to know that. And that was a congressional, I don't call it earmark. I know they don't call it earmark anymore, but that was a congressional earmark. Is there a time limit when that money needs to be expended, approved and expended?
I believe it's going to be based on the grant requirements for housing and urban development. I would expect it's probably a 5-year grant with option to extend. That's another thing that I can confirm. We have a copy of the grant agreement in our files. I just haven't looked at it in quite a while.
So I would like to know how much the grant is. One question I've had with this. Did we put in a length of time that this lease has to be put in place? You know, like by May
It's
of,
within
20
fiscal year 27.
within FY 27,
Mhm.
but it has to be done.
Yes.
Correct.
So the first sentence on the first line, notwithstanding 20, say 166 in FY 27 is authorized.
Yes.
But we're not saying it needs to be completed. The lease needs to be completed by the end of FY 27.
Well, they're authorized to enter into the lease in FY 2027. If it rolls over into 2028, they're not authorized to enter that lease.
Okay. Got it. Because I just didn't want this to go on and they didn't have a lease.
Understood. And they basically have 1 fiscal year to do it.
Yeah. Anything else? Anything else for folks? Where are we on the language? Are we all right with the language? Other folks?
I have no issues here.
Okay, sounds good. Sounds good. So it's included in our draft for the capital bill this year. We're gonna get the capital bill out this week. And then it will go over to the Senate. So you'll wanna pay attention, and Kate's here. She can be a dog on a bone. And carry this through to the Senate Institutions Committee for that. So thank you, Michael, for all the work you did on this.
Thank you.
Very
Great.
helpful.
Thanks for
Thank you,
accommodating me.
Catherine. Yep, no problem. Thank you,
Bye.
Catherine, and thank you, Becca.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
so
you
much.
all.
Just let us know, Becca, how much the grant money is.
I will. Thanks a
Just,
lot.
Email Tate Mullen.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sounds
Thank
good.
you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye-bye. So what have we got going? So the next thing we have is the entry project. So I know we got BGS here. We don't have Agatha, so if somebody could let Agatha know.
I get that.
Oh, God. So just give the committee a little heads up. There's conversations about school construction going on, and they're looking at bonded dollars.
Were
Education
Ways
from
and means.
their ways and means, and I think they're dreaming.
There's no money. Did you think?
Well, I mean, you got maybe $1 million or 2 million or 3 million at the most, but you got $100 million need.
Do they need an equipment shed somewhere?
That's a start.
And we don't have what would be eligible
Right.
for those bonded dollars. People left in the building that new school construction.
Wanda knows it.
Get the picture in here.
Yeah.
Yeah, Wanda in here.
Given the fact there's no money, it's almost a moot point.
Or the fact that we're not
You
even
could
sure.
find some money, but you can only find a couple million.
Precisely.
In reality, and you don't know what those bonded dollars would go to because there's no standards in place now that would tell you what is eligible for state aid.
There are a couple other questions regarding the whole education delivery thing too. That are outstanding.
Sean,
So this,
we're on YouTube.
Yeah, does that,
No,
like, just, I'm not as familiar with the education's, funding and all that. I know that we just passed a capital bond in Shelburne to do work on the schools. Isn't that like, is that some responsibility on the actual town to take money out to build, or is that part of
Yes,
it?
Comes out of the ed fund.
But don't towns themselves like go get a bond and
Yeah,
then
but
finance?
what used to happen under the old school
Yeah.
construction, we would pick up 30%
Okay.
hang on. 30% of the eligible costs within that project. If you had a $30 million project for school construction, it does not mean you're gonna get $10 million
Okay,
from the
gotcha.
state.
Gotcha.
Because there are items that is not eligible for state aid. That's what we have to figure out going forward. What is going to be eligible and what is not? If you're using bonded dollars, it's gotta be for actual construction. And you've got to figure out what is eligible. So the state has to work with those local school boards. Figure out if you've got a $30 million construction project, maybe only 3 million of that is eligible for state aid because you've gone beyond what the standards require. So an example of a standard, this is just an example, could be what's required by the state as a standard is 10 square feet per pupil. Okay? And that would be eligible. Those 10 square feet for construction would be eligible for 30% state aid. If the district wants to build 15 feet per square foot per pupil, they're not gonna get state aid on that 5 extra square feet.
It would still be
So
based
that's
on
what
that
you
10.
need. Yes, and that's where you need somebody on the state level to work with the school board to understand how that plays into the big project. Because what's being said out there is, oh, we can pick up, say, 10% or 30% of your budget. So if you have $100 million school construction project going on, you're not getting 30 million from the state.
So how did we do that with Burlington? What happened with
I don't
Burlington?
want to go to Burlington.
Well,
I don't want to do that.
that was a egregious inequities. It's what that was.
it's what? Oh. Oh, I see.
That sums it up well.
Something.
Because that's a 180 or 200
Yeah,
million
it was
dollar
a
project.
15 or 16.
After tearing down a building that probably didn't need to get torn down by.
Well, that's beyond us at this point.
Oh, that's gone too, by
But
the way.
what we really need to be clear is what is going to be eligible. And I don't think we have figured that out
Gotcha.
yet.
Okay.
So that then to look at funding, and you don't know what it's gonna go to, it's doing a disservice to our communities. And it's putting the state in a real financial
I think
bond.
it's safe to say that that's nothing that has to be figured out this year.
Doesn't mean people don't want to try.
They're doing it.
Well, there are just so many things. So many prerequisites.
Did you let Agatha know?
And BGS used to build the stuff, right?
No.
They did.
No, the only thing that BGS ever did was when we got into, and we're live, folks. When we got into redoing our career education tech centers. We paid 100% of those construction costs. And the construction costs were reaching 20 to 24 million.
Mhm.
And we were paying 100%, so we only had about $8 million in our capital bill to go towards school construction.
Gotcha.
So what was happening, because those construction projects were getting so big and it was beyond the school board level, we had BGS help those school districts for the projects with that one. Because we were paying 100%. It was only for those texts. It was like 3 of them. And that's what broke the budget
Yep.
in the capital bill. Because we had that obligation and we couldn't carry through. We didn't have the capacity to cap. So we just headed right back down to that. We do this.
Well, you used to, but in relative terms, the capital bill doesn't have the resources it wants to.
Well, how's about the equivalent? So now you got the cash, because we only had $30 million to bond back. Back and forth. You lived with us with school construction. You were in the committee assistant. Remember that struggle that we went through. Anyway, so let's shift gears. The reentry.
Or the entry.
Reentry here in the state house. We have put in at this stage. In the cabinet, 1.3 million. And I know there's concern on some parts of the committee here on what that gets us. And what it needs to get us before we do more steps. So I wanted to have some opportunity for BGS and Sergeant Arms to come before us to talk about this. So I don't know who should go first, if it should be BGS. We go back to this document here, folks. State House entry overview, March 10th. You've got it on your website, on the website, it's March 10th. There is the schedule of an estimated time frame, and we have right now penciled in 1.3 million, but if I remember the testimony, by the time we get back next session, that 1.3 the full amount may not be needed to get us through design projects. Emily, welcome. You can identify yourself for the record.
Good morning, Emily Kosicki, Deputy Commissioner of Buildings and General Services. And I am pleased to be joined by your Sergeant at Arms and Sean Brennan from Freeman French Freeman. We have been working together, as you've heard in previous testimony, to support this project. And the 1.3 million, that is based on a need for additional funding to continue design work on this project. We are currently in design development. I think heading towards the later stages of that work. However, the funding that we currently have available would be exhausted, and so additional funding would be needed to move into construction documents to continue again that process for this project.
So for the current dollars that you have, remind us how much that is and when would it be exhausted?
So funding to date has included ARPA funding, which expires at the end of this year. Capital bill funding in the amount of $150,000 from the access decree, and then some capital bill funding in the amount of $48,780 from planning reuse contingency in the acts of 20. So
that doesn't really track with this chart here. So I'm trying to.
Okay.
So,
I think I'm looking at a different.
yeah, this is what was given to us on the 10th of March.
That includes ARPA work.
Yeah. Yeah, so the ARPA funding, which we have to get out by the end of the year, is about, back then, 2 weeks ago, it's 243,447. So that's what's left. And then we have put in different appropriations. Never do math in public, so you got about 23,000 in FY 20 and 21. And then there was 150,000 cash in 24. So you got about 180,000 of state dollars. And of that, you got about 103,000 left. So for a total of 346,000. So are those still your numbers?
Those are still the numbers. The ARPA funding was originally higher and then was reduced because funds weren't obligated. So again, the ARPA funds have to be expended by end of year. Then to, again, continue work based on what we have available, we would need the additional funding. And your numbers are accurate, I know.
So when I look at this chart here, it looks like what you have in the balance left at 346,000 would get you through design development documents and beginning of the construction documents with what you have in hand now. Is that accurate?
I think the very beginning, the $1.3 million number was based on a desired timeline. So there were different options that were available for construction schedules based on different scenarios of trying to minimize impact during the legislative session. And this particular scenario that underlies the $1.3 million would be to try to move it along sort of faster in the process for a 3 construction season schedule.
So for the committee, the schematic design, it's a very 30,000 foot view. It's really your beginning what it could go through. But then your design development refines that into the more particulars of the construction project. So right now, we're at the beginning piece of the design development piece.
Further along in the design development piece, we're closer to the end, actually, moving a bit ahead of schedule.
We're approaching 70.
You just identify stuff.
Oh, sorry. Sean Brennan from the French Room. To answer that question, we're approaching 70%. So
Is it 75?
75.
Okay.
Representative Evans, I Kessler, Sergeant House of the record. The red arrow, which says we are here, is just in the wrong spot. It should be further down, down the road. We're hoping to finish by August of 2026. We started in November last year. We're hoping to finish in August of 2026 with design development.
So the arrow reflects where you were in November.
So what are some issues you're starting to see as you're refining these design documents? What are some of the issues that are percolating up to the top? Are there any? And I'm gonna open it up to the 3 of you.
Well, I'll let Sean speak in more detail, just some of the things that I've been thinking about as we discuss options is, you know, how this particular project impacts other areas and flow of traffic through the State House. So that's something we've been discussing with the Sergeant at Arms. We've talked about potential water mitigation issues that we've done some initial testing on that front for what's currently in the coat room. And then, of course, there's a lot of
So it's
stakeholder
water issues within the building.
underlying the building
Underlying,
from the ledge. Okay. And then, of course, just some initial conversations about the design and stakeholder interest in that. And that's really very in the early conversation stages and process that'll be led by the Sergeant at Arms in partnership with us. But those are just some of the issues that I've been thinking about, but I'd invite our partners to chime in too.
Sure. The three primary technical issues that we've been resolving through the design development process involve code conformance. So there are a number of things that are non-conforming in the existing buildings. So it is a conversation with the authorities having jurisdiction as to how to add on to the building in a way that does not increase the non-conformity. So we've been addressing that. We have resolution to that with the code officials.
So by doing renovations, you have to bring that up to code, and that may trigger a review of the code within the whole building. We
Correct.
know we don't comply because there's some structural impediments to that. And we've negotiated, over the years, we've negotiated with, it's the Department of Labor, is it? Or
It's,
Fire Safety.
Fire safety.
Department of Fire Safety, we've negotiated mitigating aspects because you can't reach code due to limitations in the building.
Exactly, because the building wasn't built at the time current codes were reinforced. So there's, in many cases, there's no way to retroactively initiate those code conforming measures. So what we've done is we've addressed it in a different manner, protecting what we're building and addressing things like area limitations, how much you can build based on your type of construction, separations, things like that. So we've resolved those issues. The other two issues that we're resolving are how do you build a construction between two buildings and still deal with snow and rain? And so roof construction has been a technical challenge that we're still working through. We have an approach, but we're working out the details. And then something you probably are all familiar with, dealing with HVAC. So heating, ventilating, air conditioning. How do we address that with the new construction such that it meets current codes and addresses the other areas we're renovating as far as meeting those codes as well? So logistically, there's, as you all know, a lack of space available in current buildings. And so how do we come up with the space to address renovated areas? So we're working through that as well. We have solutions.
So is that going to increase the overall cost of the project?
That's included currently in the cost of the project as far as it's been estimated to be
And that is, it's about 18 million.
18.6.
Questions?
Does the scope of this include what's gonna be done about ingress egress for truck deliveries and parking? So I just didn't see any of that in the presentation.
It's part of, it's the piece we have to finish in design development, haven't developed the parking plan. And the outside schematics yet, so that's to be determined. We know we'll lose the sea lock, which is the one right outside, it has 6 parking spots in it, so we know that much. But to optimize, we've looked at some sketches, but to optimize how the 18-wheelers can come in and come out and to optimize the parking lot behind the pink lady, that's all still that last piece of design development that we need to do.
Yeah, so now obviously we become more ADA compliant, but then there's no ADA parking in close proximity to the building that would be somewhat self-defeating.
Yes.
Are there any spitball ideas? Yeah, or-
So we know that on the east side, of the building. That's where our best parking spots are for people who need access to the building. It's flat, it's close to the Lincoln door. So that would be the best spot, but not necessarily for the public. Because the entrance will be on the opposite side of the building. So, we still have the 2 spots by the Pink Lady that we're going to reshift and optimize. And then we'll have to use spots behind the Pink Lady for the public. But you're hitting on a very critical piece of State House and access. This project, being in our current state is we basically have no parking for members of the public that need an ADA space. The spots are, the closest spot is down by 2 Aiken. Then you have to walk up the hill to get to the building. So
So, yeah, and even if all the members drove here individually, then there isn't adequate parking for them.
so there is, but we have, I don't want to go down a rabbit hole of parking, but we have enough parking spots for legislators. Every legislator has, we have 180 parking spots for 180 legislators. What we have is probably more of an enforcement issue, is people parking. It's very hard to address it because legislators do not have assigned parking. Again, I don't want to go down a rabbit hole because I have some ideas for the future, but when you come to the State House and you're a legislator, and you're looking for a place to park and you're a general parker, not a reserved spot, you're just gonna look for the next open spot. So there's no way for us or for BGS to really know if there are legislators parking in legislative spots. There's no efficient way of doing that. So we have 180 parking spots for 180 legislators. You each drive your own car. You could drive to work every day, Representative Casey. You should have a spot, but we have enforcement issue. So we can do better with that.
And if I may, there are more spots during session that are designated for legislative use during session than there are legislators. Those are available as well to legislative staff, in a number of areas, including on Aiken, by 2 Aiken, as well as across the street. And also staff and legislators are able to park in general state parking lots as well. And they do, I observe that frequently, like in the lot behind 133. So there should be sufficient space, but it may not be directly adjacent to the State House. That can fill up quickly.
So big parking thing in those legislative spots. I mean, this is more controlled here to come in, but you could come in the back way in here and still get in without a card.
Yes,
Parking over here, you can't get in
right.
without a card. Aiken, you don't need a card.
Mhm.
In the pit, you don't need a card. So who is parking in that? Is it folks who are working like in 120 State Street or 133 State Street? Is it legislative staff? Do you have any clue?
I think it's everyone. And I'll just give you a quick anecdote. I was walking up Aiken one morning. I parked across the street because I often give up my spot for people who need ADA access. That's the only reason why I keep a spot. So I parked across the street and I was walking up and I noticed someone parking on Aiken. It was probably 7:45 in the morning. I said, "Excuse me, I'm so sorry, but I know you're not a legislator. You're not supposed to park here." No, it was more like 8. And he said, "I'm sorry, I'm late. I have to testify." And he was frantic. And I said, "Please move your car." And he didn't. So he took the spot of a legislator. So it's all kinds of people. And BGS and the Sergeant Arms Office, we have to work together to improve our enforcement. But without legislators having assigned parking for every single legislator, it's very hard to track. So that's,
How could you even do that? I mean, you put a sign up, but it doesn't prevent folks from parking there. I mean, I see that over here. They're numbered. And I know there are legislators who are parking in a reserved spot that's not his.
yes.
So how do you, even if it's reserved, how do you administer that? Because
So,
people aren't using legislative plates anymore, and they're supposed to hang something from the window.
Yes.
And a lot of times that doesn't happen.
No, they're good about, I got one on.
You do, but it doesn't mean.
No, I didn't have it and they gave me a warning.
So I,
Yes.
I will share that, you know, we, BGS Safety and Security in coordination with the Sergeant at Arms, we have increased our monitoring and light touch enforcement. This session, we hired some temporary parking attendants. I think we shared that in, previous testimony. Especially, in combination with the hybrid work standard, there are more folks, coming to Montpelier, especially during session, and we do know that parking is a challenge, and so we have been more actively monitoring it. Again, it is not our goal or desire to go out and tow people where we don't have to, right? So we've taken more of an educational approach, putting reminders on vehicles, and if it's a problem or if they're clearly parking in an area where they can't be, like a fire, a striped fire area, we will tow, but that's very rare. So again, we have been monitoring. I wouldn't say that we've observed that it is a overwhelming issue. It's more of a, and occasionally we'll notice someone parking in a spot, a reserved spot where they really shouldn't, but I wouldn't say it's very prevalent.
and it's most likely an underreported issue because a legislator will pull in, be frustrated, there's no parking, park for a day and never report it.
If they
So
They should.
it's likely underreported, but something that BGS and the Sergeant at Arms office can work together on is there's levels, you know, there's the warning sign that can, the warning note that can go out all the way up to towing. But in between, there can be ticketing, which we haven't done in the past, but we can give that an option to us. So the parking issue is there's lots of levels and there's lots of ways we can address it.
Do you have a list of legislators and their license plate number?
No.
Not their legislative plate number, but their regular plate, because I know in the old days, if you came in here with a different car, you had to go to the Sergeant at Arms and you had to tell them what that plate number was, so that they knew that you were a legislator in that spot. We had to do that in the old days.
We're not doing that.
We're not doing it. Another thing that happened in the old days, there was a real uproar, and I think, Mary, you were here, and this was probably back 2012, 2014. There was, people were coming in, they had access to our lots that were gated, because folks were handing out cards to swipe. So even our gated lots, we couldn't find parking in, and that was happening. I don't think that's happening now, but that was happening. And it was worse back then.
Yes,
It
and
was really bad.
we are working with BGS to actually audit who has access through the gate. We've done a lot of work together in the last few months on access to parking lots, access to the building. It's all part of our security program and our screening program. But yes, we are trying to rein it in quite a bit.
So is there a way, at least for Aiken Ave, because Aiken Ave has access, anybody can come in, park on Aiken Ave, and then they get down Baldwin, they don't have to come in by the pink lady here, they could go to the next driveway and pop up. Or they could go all the way up Bailey and down that way. Is there a way to place a person at the foot of Aiken to check the cars coming in to make sure that they?
I mean, so again, we do have roving monitors. And just, I haven't observed or heard of an issue that would rise to the level of deploying staff to monitor traffic coming in on Aiken. It is also, you know, people can drive through it, so not everyone is entering to park. I would encourage, if members are really having a challenge finding a place to park, to report it to the Sergeant at Arms, and we can work together to find strategies to address it. Again, I just haven't had anything funnel up to BGS to alert us to a problem that would rise to that level of deploying resources in that way. We can certainly work to improve communication and reminders. Again, BGS does in the advance of the legislative session, we send out maps to all state employees. And I would say, I think that oftentimes where you might see someone parking where they're not supposed to, it's oftentimes a member of the public. They're coming to an event, they're coming to testify, they're not familiar with all the rules and the signs. I think state employees who work in Montpelier are generally familiar with the rules and tend to respect it well. So oftentimes it's sort of folks that we have less communication touch points with, and maybe we could look at better signage or other ways to communicate.
Well, that's just, but you can go first. Signs that cost money, I mean, it's not cheap. And the only way for people who don't know, state employees and us, to make sure that they don't park somewhere they're not supposed to. You pull into a parking spot, doesn't have a sign. How do you know it's not right? And even if it says number 56, which I park 56 or 57, doesn't mean anything to anybody, you know? So it'd have to say legislative parking only or something, but to get that many signs, it's not like millions, but it's still.
That's what we're here for.
Right.
Right now, all legislative reserve spots do have individual signs, like even across the street, and like they are signed for reserve. And in our state lots, I would say there are signs sort of at the entry, like even just across the street or the 133 parking lot, it does say reserved for state employee use during the day, but perhaps because they're available for public use after hours or on weekends, which is a good thing, right? It's state property. Sometimes folks aren't always as mindful of restrictions during the workday. And I would say also lots tended to be emptier during the pandemic years, et cetera. So maybe habits changed a bit.
And the last thing I'll add is, when we get the security officers on board, which should be in a couple weeks, to operate security screening at the door, it will free up the Capitol Police. And I've already asked the chief, because the parking lots are an issue, not just for parking, but for safety. So I've already spoken to the chief, and when we get those security officers here, there will be a parking lot patrol in the morning and in the evening, the legislative duty. And part of that is the enforcement. Right? I really do see parking. It's not a space issue. We have all the space. We have 180 spots for legislators and another, I think, we have 250 spots total. We have more than enough spots. We have an enforcement issue. So that's on the list for Capitol Police.
But I would think that folks, once you get comfortable, for legislators, once you get comfortable parking in a certain spot, you're gonna want to go back to that spot.
And so one of the ideas, I don't want to get ahead of myself, is to actually have parking space for every legislator. So you'd be number 75, you'd be number 76, and right where you are because you're the dean of the house. So it just makes it easier, because then when you pull up, and you're like, I'm number 75 and someone's in my spot, you know to report it. Right now, legislators don't know how to report it because they just go to the next open spot. So we'll have a much better idea of how to solve the issue if there's assigned parking. But that would be a huge, huge project. So
I want to go down by.
And I would protest because Sean would have a lower number.
he basically has an assigned spot.
It's such a big deal.
Yeah.
So how many requests, we've got to tie this up a little bit, because I know parking is an issue, ADA is an issue. So how many requests do you get in a week for the public ADA parking? And you get parking?
Dozens.
Dozens during the week.
It's so hands-on. It's
Yeah.
it is practically, it's almost a miracle to be able to pull up to the state house and park independently without having to ask for help if you need ADA. And that's why I give up my spot most of the time for members of the public who need a place to park.
So you only have 2 spots now, and a half.
Pretty much. And my one not secret spot, but I always try to keep one of the C lot open.
Yeah.
And that was just assigned to a legislator who has a temporary mobility issue.
So how does that process work? Like, does somebody pull up and then like there's a spot and they call in the sergeant at arms, or?
Usually Capitol Police, that's the phone number that's posted at the gate.
Oh, okay.
And then the Capitol Police will help them find a spot, and sometimes we will move one of the police officers' cars or a staff member will move to make a spot for a member of the public.
So I'm wondering, is there a way, because you're gonna fill in courtyard to the doors that go to the Lincoln hallway? Is there a way to extend that? And have that open specifically an entryway there to the corridor for ADA access only? Is there a way to redesign and to go beyond the arch? But you got the doors, the back way up to the mezzanine, the speaker's office, and then you've got the door into the Lincoln hallway. If you went beyond that and had an entrance there specifically legislators to use it, but also maybe that's where ADA folks would enter the building and not have to go around here. Is there a way to redesign filling in the corridor and going further?
At the east end of the courtyard, underneath the archway.
Yep.
On the east side of where the Lincoln corridor exits. We have an entrance there for the legislators currently design with the vestibule, so that can, at anyone's discretion, whatever has authority, that can be used by anybody.
But could that be the designated ADA entrance? And I know that would put pressure in terms of the screening. But if you know that there's ADA folks coming in, they would need card access.
Yes.
It wouldn't be open like it would be here. They would need card access. But if you knew, usually you know folks coming in who need ADA access. You could arrange that in advance.
We could, and they could come in, but we likely would need additional architecture to support that. We would need to have a screening operation though,
Right.
on that side of the building.
Right.
And that can be achieved. So we talk about, I've actually started to change some of the language. I'm not referring it to single point of entry. I'll refer to it as security screening, because the goal is not to have a single point of entry. The goal is to have screening at every entry. But so you could theoretically have 2 screening operations on the east and west. It's just twice the staff, twice the equipment, but not twice the amount of architecture, structure, design. Like the entry will already be, the east side entry will already be there.
It's for folks like us.
Yes.
And staff. But I'm wondering if that is the entrance that we use for ADA. And then because you've got the parking there.
Yeah.
For that. What do you do during the summer? The doors, front doors are open. You're just not doing that anymore, talking about those front doors?
We stick to opening the front doors for as long as I'm alive.
Because that's really important.
But so no, in the tourist season,
Yeah.
the doors will be open.
They have to.
And my goal is still to open those front doors at least one day during session for legislators to enjoy.
Yeah, that's how you get out of here. We're done. You're gonna roll those front doors.
If it's during a legislative session, we'll just have a mobile
That is
security station at the door. Very important from a symbolic point of view to have those front doors.
The session's ending, it's time to finish up and get out of here. Yes, it's emotional.
Yes.
Same like we used to open up the windows in the well. So I hope the Germans coming.
Yes.
Gotta have those little signals.
But to the original point, when this design comes back, we're gonna see some kind of
Parking thing.
ingress egress for trucks and parking plans incorporated in it.
We've been working on this.
So where are we as a committee? What we've just got is just language in the capital bill on page 2
Mhm.
that says State House entry upgrades. Do we put in design documents? So at least we know what's happening with that money? So we have nothing
Yeah.
here,
Yeah.
absolutely nothing.
Yeah. And it's acceptable to add some language to be inclusive of, trucking ingress egress in parking reconfigurations.
What would that language say?
Well, that's for John Gray.
The parking plan or whatever.
That'd be an element that would be part of this proposal when it's getting.
A parking plan for,
ADA.
well, it's-
No, for
no, for legislative staff and the public and ADA. and trucking
Yeah.
deliveries.
Not necessarily be a part of
Seeing the parking. entrance plans.
Just to clarify for
Yeah.
understanding, would it be parking plan to address the loss of spaces that you're seeing, or like a broader parking plan? Because we've been discussing that. I just want,
I think it'd be the loss of spaces and then just to make sure that we have proper ingress egress for truck deliveries. Which is strained now and it's gonna be, that much more challenging.
And ADA access.
Sure.
And that's in here already.
Parking. Parking. ADA.
Gotcha.
There's the entryways for ADA, but it's the park. I'm looking at the parking. So a parking plan to address loss of spaces, trucking access, and ADA parking.
Mhm.
Is that what folks want?
Yes.
Yes. And keep it at 1.3 and that we're in design documents. Should we say construction documents as well?
I think the flexibility of just leaving it to design work or something more generic might give us some flexibility.
Can I ask, a question? I know you usually ask the witness question. So you can ask the
No, go
question.
ahead.
Is that permission? If you don't include construction documents in the language, it doesn't preclude us from moving into that phase, correct? Because this 1.3 million would give us the opportunity, gives us the opportunity to start working with a construction management firm. So I just want to make sure the language does, specificity of the language doesn't preclude.
Next year, we'd have to figure out where we're finding the money. Because once you get that far, then you're going out to bid and we're not committed to money yet. So I allow you to go out to bid.
Yeah, that's why I was suggesting the more generic design work, but I wouldn't. Because he wouldn't be right hiring.
Because the process will be come January. You're not gonna be ready to go out to bid with those construction documents. You'll be in the beginning of construction documents. So it will be more refined. The governor's not gonna put any money in to go forward with construction. I mean, that's gonna be the reality of the situation. So then in testimony before this committee, you need to know what is happening. You finish your design documents. You've begun your construction documents, so it refines more of what the issues are coming up to the top and what issues have been resolved. And then the legislature will work with BGS and Sergeant Arms and Freeman French Freeman and say, this is not looking quite right. What about if you tweak this? The cost is gonna go up. Maybe we see a price tag of 22 million and we say, oh, wait a minute, we're not going that high. What could we cut back on? Those are gonna be the conversations next year in this committee. And then you kind of finalize what money you're gonna put in for FY 28 and FY 29. So FY 28 will get you to go out to bid. And maybe start some construction, maybe. That would be in the summer, spring, summer of 28. But you're not gonna start construction in October 27. With the session starting in December or January. So your construction season's not gonna start until May of 28. Really? Am I off base on that one, Sean?
Not major construction. If we did start early, it would probably be in the form of some enabling projects. So that we would be ready to start the primary construction.
Which you could start at the end of 27, possibly, if the money's there. But you can't go out to bid, and you're not gonna finalize those construction documents until you come back here.
Right.
Because we can say, wait a minute, this looks right on target, or wait a minute, this is overboard. That will be the next step. So the 1.3 gets you to the beginning of construction documents. And then next year, that 1.3 will get you to the end of the construction documents, which is spring 27. Summer of 27.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Makes sense to folks for the timeline?
That sounds good.
Okay, so we'll work on some language. We'll pass it by BGS, you, Sean, you can, Agatha can share it with Sean. Sense? Yeah. So, thank you, folks, for coming in. So we're off of, let's go off of YouTube. We will be back at some point, but just not sure how the day's gonna flow. Yeah, hopefully maybe we can come off the floor.